Hi, everyone. You're listening and watching Rashkin Report, and this is your host, Yuri Rashkin. I am quite excited to welcome back to the program a famous writer and a famous journalist. How much better could it be? So I feel quite fortunate to have joining me today, Mikhail Iossel, joining us from Montreal, Canada, author of his latest book right there. I believe my other guest also has a copy of Mikhail's book. So Slava Malamud, a sports journalist that's not limited to sports only, and Mikhail Iossel, a writer. Welcome to Rashkin Report.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you, Yuri.
Well, the topic of today's discussion is the division in American society. And I think it's always interesting to bring perspective of people from a different culture because this Russian background, it's got to have some use. It's got to be useful somehow. That maybe we just Russian culture teaches people how to suffer better. I don't know. But there's a lot of divisions in American society. So how do you see it? Do you look at this and go, this is worrisome? Or do you look at this and go, in Russia, forget it. By Russian standards, this is heaven. Mikhail, you go ahead.
Worrisome, yeah, very worrisome. I don't see any direct parallels with the Soviet Union or Russia. Very different history, very different historical pattern, very different mindset of the larger part of the population, but worrisome within the American context, of course. This has happened before, this intensity of division, it happened before, but this is close to a boiling point, and it can boil over, and we don't know what forms it will take. This the situation that is shaping right now. It's a very difficult moment in American history. It will be overcome because America has been through more difficult moments in its history. But that doesn't mean that we should not be worried, because after all, this is our moment, this is our life, and our timeline is much shorter. Our timeline is much shorter than history's timeline, and so it's dangerous what we're seeing in the United States right now. It's and in some ways it's heartbreaking.
Slava, what do you think?
I don't necessarily see parallels between the Soviet Union and the United States. Obviously, two countries with a vastly different DNA and a vastly different mindset. But I do see some echoes of the of what's happening in Russia right now on the American right, in a post-Trump era. In particular, the being enamored with totalitarianism and authoritarian strongmen, and the tendency to, of course, view it through a prism, or view the personification of power through a prism of this cult figure that Trump has become. Basically, Trump has been regarded in the right now and worshipped in the right, very much the same way as Putin is being worshipped in Russia by his more fanatical followers. Though I have to say that Russians as a whole are much more cynical than Americans tend to be. But another part of this, the other side of the coin, is this blithe disregard for facts, expertise, science, truth. I saw it in Russia years ago. There was this tendency of, I always said that Putin's greatest achievement, as far as changing the psychology of the Russian people, was not to make them think that he tells the truth. Is to make them think that there's no such thing as the truth. He knows very well that Russians are deep down inside don't really trust anyone, and they know that people who rule over them are crooks. But he made them believe that people everywhere are crooks. All governments are crooks, and there's no such thing as a better experience elsewhere. Something, a lodestar that Russia could follow. At least we have our own crooks. We understand them, we get them, so we're going to side with them. In America, situation is a little bit different, but again, the underlying distrust of experts, distrust of facts, of mainstream media, of professional journalists. Instead, going to cookie websites and doing my own research and thinking that I know better than professional immunologists about whether or not they need to get a vaccine. And it spreads into all areas of human endeavor, obviously, not just immunology. But this is the right's playground right now, and it's very similar to the type of attitudes that are prevailing in Russia. And if you watch Russian TV shows now, news shows, comedy shows, entertainment shows, you'll see a lot of the same attitudes prevailing in the Russian society as they do in America. In regards to feminism, to Black Lives Matter, to these cultural rift lines in our society. You'll see that Russia sides very much with the American right, and Putin is very much in the same boat with the likes of Ted Cruz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. They basically say the same thing. And it's kind of scary to me. Yeah, I mean, I did not come here in 1991 to be immersed in the same type of discourse.
Yes, like our parents didn't protest this, so that we would have to do this again, or something like that. Mikhail, speaking of culture, culture wars. You have this wonderfully reviewed new book, Love Like Water, Love Like Fire. How would you feel if some school district decided that your book was absolutely unacceptable and had to be removed from the libraries of that school? How would you feel?
Well, yeah, but that's happened before, right? Well, in the case of my book, there is no such eventuality, but I don't see it. But what's going to happen is that lots of people would say, why should we care about it? What's in it for us? That country no longer exists. That life is vastly different from ours. Why should we care? And book burning has been practiced on both sides, by the way, for a very long time in American society. And wherever people start burning books, a priori, no matter what their goals are, basically there, that's extremely worrisome. But there's always been a powerful anti-intellectual streak in American society, much stronger than in Europe or any place else. That's a hallmark of American society. Just very strong and intellectual streak, and there was a party of know nothings in the 19th century, and that's just a fact of life. And the more complex life gets, the more there is a desire to simplify it to an extreme degree, and the more the more difficult it is to understand the world around us and how things work around us, the greater the temptation to basically to delve into a cesspool of conspiratorial theaters. Conspiratorial thinking is just sophistication of the ignorant and stupid people. And so, and right now, it's of course it's a very with the social media. Of course, that's everybody. Everybody has a voice. Everybody is an expert. Indeed, everybody has fears and surmises and theories, and we are drowning in this cacophony. And it's nonetheless, it also is important to realize, though, that Twitter is not real life, and Facebook is not real life, and social media, after all, How many people? 6% of the population are active on Twitter in the United States, 6%. But we sometimes mistake it for the voice of American society, the sheer din of democracy. It is not. It's just the activists on both sides. Same on Facebook, same everywhere else. The mainstream American society, bottom line is, yes, cultural wars, yes, clear leaning towards authoritarianism in the Republican Party, yes, people on the right, and generally lots of people, tens of millions of Americans, no longer know what they take democracy for granted, and no longer know what's good about it, what's in it for them in democracy. Why should they like it? Why should they love it when it helps solve none of their problems, which are essentially of economic character? That's the bottom line still. But also, of course, cultural wars, because we are basically, there is tremendous polarization on the right and on the left. And on the fringes of the right and the left, there is great amount of voltage. And that creates a very difficult situation, very hard to come to terms on almost anything at all right now in American society. There are objective factors underlying this situation, of course, but that doesn't make things any easier. However, if we just step back for a moment and think that only 8 years ago, the country, majority of people in the voters in this country voted for a black man for president twice, 12 and 8 years ago. So people are people everywhere, and in America also, and trends come and go, and crises come and then they abate, and this too shall pass eventually.
How do we bridge this divide, though? Because what we see is that the divide can go, it's not like we had during Civil War, where we had pro-slavery and anti-slavery states. We have this divide that goes through households, through families, through, because everybody's news feed is different on social media. And somebody next to you could be going down QAnon rabbit hole. Although I understand that they're upset because I guess none of the predictions are coming true. So that's a good thing.
Well, there is a universe of just desperately stupid people too, right? Just remarkably stupid. And those people are generally unreachable because they're very stupid. And then there is a small universe of rabid racists, and those people are unreachable also. They're unreachable, but or at least up to a certain point. Maybe they will have a awakening later in life somehow. But the majority of people are driven by very simple preoccupations. Yes, they can be easily scared, and yes, they could be confused. And yes, they can be confused into thinking that Democrats are their enemies, that immigrants are their enemies, that Black people are to be feared, and so forth. But the majority of people are driven by very simple considerations, and those are basically their fear for their families and the well-being of their families, and the economic factors that are basically driving lots of people to despair, because the situation is difficult for lots and lots of Americans for a variety of reasons that are readily available and very well understood. I think that if Democrats, I think here Biden at least has the right idea. Show people that you can make their lives better on a very simple, basic economic level. Just show them that. And find a way to assuage people's fears about the most shrill voices on the extreme left of your party, because lots of people feel insulted by that. And that's what I think. That's what I believe. And also, strong leaders appear when time warrants their appearance. There are strong leaders, of course, and Slava has already mentioned some of those people, but there are more. They will appear. They will come. Lincoln also came sort of like out of nowhere at a certain point. Times call up people that are capable of dealing with them somehow. So Biden's a transitory character. Trump is a transitory character. Incidentally, both of those men are in their late 70s.
Well,
something is bound to happen.
There's Pete Buttigieg, so
there is Pete Buttigieg who is immensely talented. Yes, immensely talented, for instance. There are other people. There are other people.
Slava?
Well, yeah, there are different ways of looking at it. For example, I always find it extremely unfair and infuriating that Democrats are always called to temper their rhetoric and rein in what people consider their extreme left, even though people who are on the extreme left of the Democratic Party, such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, would in Europe be considered, run-of-the-mill, center-left, normal, boring politicians. She would definitely not be far left. Whereas Republicans are never told to rein in their extreme right, which is out of control.
I'm not talking about Ocasio-Cortez and about people in Congress. Bear in mind that I'm professor at the university in the humanities.
I mean, I understand, but the people who are on extreme left of the Democratic movement are not in power generally, whereas the people who are on extreme right of the Republican movement, well, we just had one in the White House a year ago. The Republicans are way, way, way more to the right than Democrats are, and it's the Republican Party as a whole in any country of the world would nowadays be considered to be a far-right party. It'll be like a neo-fascist party in most, and their sane center-right Republican moderates are an extreme minority and are actively being hunted down and primaried and chased out of the Republican Party right now as we speak. But this is the reality of life in America. In America,
Slava, I have a question for both of you that maybe will help me understand where you stand on this one. In Virginia, during the governor's election, Democrats lost. Do you feel that they lost because they didn't go far enough, or because they were going too far? Are the Democratic positions too much for this country, or Democrats are not going far enough?
They lost because they had a horrible candidate who was very uninspiring and
Terry McAuliffe,
he did not have a clear message.
Well, he used to be governor before. He used to be electable, and he would have been elected if he hadn't made that harebrained statement, which scared lots of people, and rightly so, that parents have no say in what their children are taught at schools. He lost because, make no mistake, that's why he lost. That's why Democrats lost. And if this pattern is not recognized,
and yet, if you imagine that people can say that parents of patients have no say about how their loved ones are treated in a hospital, that wouldn't quite work.
Oh no, that's very different. That's very different. We trust doctors in a very different way than we trust teachers. And we're not talking about astronomy here either. And we're not talking about math. We're not talking about math. We're talking about generally shaping the worldview of young people. And parents want to have a say in that, for better or worse. But they believe that they have to have a say.
Do they deserve to have a right in that?
Yeah, they should be able to have a say in how their children are educated. Yeah.
On the other hand, if that's the case, then there are whole counties in Alabama that will teach people that slavery was the best thing that ever happened in America, and it's true.
That's not what the textbooks say. That's what the racists say.
I know, but if the parents have say in this, because right now the textbooks that you use in Alabama are printed in Texas for the most part, and Texas is very busy rewriting them and putting and taking.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem, but the fact of life remains. Parents, even horrible parents, believe that they have to have a say, and it's the business of any new generation to remove themselves from the most outdated beliefs of their parents, to overcome that.
And that's basically what I wanted to answer as far as what my opinion on how to bridge the divide is. I don't think it can be breached by any single politician or any single event. I think it will be breached by just generational change. A lot of these people who espouse these extreme right-wing beliefs are either older or represent a very tiny minority and of young people. And eventually they will, for the lack of a better word, die out. We've had these situations before in America. We've had these huge scares and extreme swings to the right. Eventually one of them had to be resolved through the force of arms, but most others just basically kind of petered out. And before or after doing incredible.
Yeah. Well, if we accept a dialectical view that every new generation is better than the preceding one and more enlightened and more progressive, not the case. I strongly recommend, lots of books are written on the subject. There is a brilliant book called The Coddling of American Mind by Jonathan Rauch and Gregory Lukianov. Brilliant, about what started happening in American universities around 2013, 2015. I've witnessed this. I can see this. How sometimes the new generations do not bring welcome change. Sometimes they just basically perpetuate the patterns of their education, and it's a very complex issue, very complex issue. But yeah, there is such a thing as the coddling of the American mind. I do see these patterns, simple patterns. Of course, if your grandparents were rabid racists, you won't be. You will be ashamed of that. Yes, okay. I see that, for instance, in Lithuania, where I did literary programs for many years, and I saw basically, the country that sort of like distinguished itself by being the ground zero of the Holocaust. Essentially, there were local fascists killed 96% of the Jews, where children and grandchildren of those people are now leading Jewish institutions because they want to atone for that historical sin and so forth. That will be happening as well. In the simplest way, of course, yes, grandchildren of racists will not be racists. Hopefully, American society is moving forward in that way, but it's moving forward not in a linear fashion at all. But it's a more complex issue than we can discuss right now, I'm afraid. But in the meantime, Jonathan Rauch writes about that generally. He's a very interesting thinker, and that book, The Coddling of American Mind, is very interesting in my mind.
And if we're looking at this just issue by issue, and racism and race relations obviously is a huge issue in America right now. Women's rights is a huge issue, and these two things I do see the generational change basically taken care of eventually at some point, because racism will, as America interbreeds and the generation of the millennials and the Zoomers gain more influence in society, outright racism will just not be an acceptable viewpoint anymore. I think what we saw with Trump might be the last gasp of the out and out heart in your sleeve racists in America. And as far as women's rights, I mean, we're probably about a few hours away from abortion being outlawed in many American states. That I also see as maybe a last gasp. I do not see the Zoomers generation putting up with that. I do not see radicalized religion being as huge of a force in America going forward as it has been.
Yeah, and to address your point, Slava, I understand fear of creeping authoritarianism in America, but I don't see Americans putting up with the minority rule. I don't see that. It's not going to happen like it did happen in Russia. It's too different. American people are too different from the history of Russian people. I don't see it happening here. I understand that fear. I don't see it happening. I don't think it will hold.
This is one of the very few moments in American history, January 6, 2021, when a very sizable part of this country actively wanted to overthrow the democratic process. The last time this happened was 1861.
Yeah.
There's been lots of cheating. There's been lots of shenanigans going on in American elections. There's been lots of radical candidates such as Barry Goldwater, but such a sizable part of America really wanting to dispense with democracy, that was scary.
Yeah, that's the force that Trump has unleashed in American society. The the fury, the anger, the bitterness pent up for decades, the anger, for reasons that we've already actually touched upon, but nonetheless. However, I would note that at no point were there were perilous moments and it was touch and go and so forth at certain points. At no moment was there realistic likelihood of their taking over the American government. Those several hundred people in the capital.
3 years from now, though?
Well, we've been warned. American society has been warned.
And so have all of us. Well, Slava, Malamud, Mikhail, Iossel, thank you so much, as always, for being on Rashkin Report. Mikhail Iossel, you can find his books in your local bookstore. Slava, you can find on Twitter. Mikhail, you can also find on Facebook. And you can find this channel on YouTube. Hit like, subscribe, leave comments. Keep watching. This was Yuri Rashkin, and take care.
Thank you, Yuri. До свидания, Slava.
Have a good one. See you.